This is HOA busted. The key ring was the detail she forgot. "I am not extending your deadline," Sharon yelled, and she shoved her phone in my face to show me a screenshot of the neighborhood group chat where she had already told everyone I was a thief. I stood on the walkway outside the Juniper Grove Homeowners Association Management Office in Spokane, Washington, holding a folded delivery photo printout and trying to stay calm while she performed for her camera. She had a cheap plastic badge clipped to her black trench coat and a key ring with too many keys jingling in her hand like it meant something. I am a security technician, so I know what real authority looks like, and this was not it. But Sharon Whitfield, Landscape Committee Chair, had just accused me of stealing packages from cars in our shared garage, and she had printed an instant violation notice that morning saying the accusation was already on record. That meant I was facing fees, a towing threat, and possible trespass action. All because a torn padded mailer had appeared near my trash bins the night before and she called it proof. I had moved into Juniper Grove 6 months earlier because the rent was reasonable and the location worked for my job. The complex was a 3-story condo community with shared garages and tight parking, and the HOA ran everything from landscaping to trash schedules. Sharon had been landscape chair for 3 years and treated the role like she was head of security. She wore the badge everywhere, carried a radio like dispatch, and kept a tabbed evidence binder that looked official but had mostly blank-looking pages. I had seen her corner people in the mailroom before, but I never thought I would be her next target. The trouble started 2 days earlier. I came home from a service call and found a torn padded mailer on the ground near my garage space. It was empty, ripped open on one side, and had no label. I tossed it in my bin without thinking. The next morning, Sharon was waiting by my car with her phone out and her key ring jingling. She said someone had reported package theft in the garage and the mailer was proof I had been casing cars. I told her I found it on the ground and threw it away. She said that was exactly what a thief would say. Then she pulled out a laminated policy sheet and read a line about residents being prohibited from tampering with mail or packages. I said I did not tamper with anything. She said a clerk at the mail center confirmed her story, and I could not undo it. I went to the mail center that afternoon to check. The clerk, a young guy named Eric, looked confused when I asked about confirming anything to Sharon. He said she had come in 2 days ago and asked if residents were allowed to pick up loose mailers from the garage floor. He told her it was fine as long as they were not addressed. He never said anything about me. He never confirmed any story. I asked him to write that down, and he did, on a sticky note. I took a photo of it with my phone and kept the note in my jacket pocket. That was clue number 1. Sharon did not care. When I showed her the photo the next day, she said the clerk was mistaken and her minutes were the truth. She said, "Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth." Then she jingled her keys and walked away. I knew that line would come back to bite her, but I did not know how yet. That same afternoon, I got an email from the HOA portal saying my account had been locked pending investigation. I could not submit maintenance requests, pay my dues online, or access community documents. Sharon had filed a complaint and the system flagged my account automatically. I called the management office and the receptionist, a calm woman named Linda, said she could not override it without board approval. She sounded tired when she said Sharon had been filing complaints all week. Then Sharon escalated. She printed an instant violation notice and taped it to my door. It said I was accused of theft from cars, I had until Friday to respond in writing, and failure to respond would result in a hearing and possible fines. It was Tuesday. The notice had no case number, no witness names, and no details. It looked official because Sharon had used HOA letterhead, but it was just her performing authority. I scanned it and saved it. That was clue number 2. By Wednesday, Sharon was telling other residents I was a thief. I ran into my neighbor Marcus at the mailbox cluster. He asked if I was the guy Sharon was talking about in the chat. I said yes, and I explained what actually happened. Marcus said Sharon had posted a long message accusing me of casing cars and taking packages, and she included a photo of the torn mailer. She said she had already reported me to management and I could not undo it. Marcus shook his head and said he was tired of her targeting people. He said he had a better camera angle on his balcony that covered part of the garage, and if I needed footage he would check. I thanked him and asked him to save anything from the past week. He agreed. That was my ally. Thursday morning, Sharon cornered me in the parking lot. She said she was reporting me to police and she started performing for her phone camera. She held it inches from my face and narrated like she was giving a deposition. She said, "This is the resident who has been accused of package theft. He is refusing to cooperate, and I am documenting this for the record." I stayed calm and said nothing. She took photos of my car, my license plate, and my jacket. Then she pulled out her radio and started talking like dispatch. She said, "Management, this is Landscape Chair. I have the theft suspect in the parking lot requesting backup." No one answered. She repeated it twice. I realized the radio was just a prop, but it looked real enough to make other residents stop and stare. I walked away and went straight to the management office. Linda was at the front desk. I told her Sharon was harassing me in the parking lot with a fake radio and taking photos. Linda sighed and said she had already received 3 complaints about Sharon that week. She said the board was aware, but they moved slowly. I asked if there was anything I could do. She said I could file a counter-complaint, but it would take weeks to process. I asked if I could request the complaint Sharon filed against me. Linda said it was in the system, but she could not print it without manager approval. I left my name and number and asked her to call me if anything changed. That afternoon, I got a call from a tow company dispatcher. He said Sharon Whitfield from Juniper Grove HOA had requested my vehicle be towed for unpaid violations. I told him I had no unpaid violations and no notice of towing. He paused and said Sharon told him I had multiple warnings and my car was blocking fire lanes. I said that was not true, and I could prove it. He asked me to send photos of my parking space and my current violation status. I sent him screenshots of my empty violation history from the portal and a wide shot of my car parked legally in my assigned space. He called back 10 minutes later and said he was canceling the request. He said Sharon had given him incorrect information and he was noting it in his records. He sounded annoyed. I thanked him and asked for his name and the incident number. He gave it to me. That was clue number 3. Sharon tried to get me trespassed from the management office waiting area next. Friday morning, I went to the office to submit my written response to her violation notice. The lobby was full because it was the last day of the month and people were paying dues and picking up access cards. Sharon was already there, standing near the door with her evidence binder and her key ring. When I walked in, she pointed at me and said loudly, "He is not allowed to be here. He is under investigation for theft. I am authorized to enforce this." Everyone in the lobby turned to look. Linda stood up from her desk and said calmly, "Ma'am, this is a public office. All residents are allowed to wait here." Sharon said she was landscape chair and she had the authority to restrict access. Linda repeated policy and asked Sharon to step aside. Sharon did not move. She opened her binder and started flipping through blank-looking pages like she was searching for proof. I stayed by the door and waited. A deputy sheriff walked in. He was there to pick up a parking pass for a community event. Sharon immediately approached him and said there was a theft suspect in the office and she needed him to remove me. The deputy looked at her, looked at me, looked at Linda. Linda said quietly, "There is no active incident. This is a civil HOA matter." The deputy nodded and told Sharon to stop yelling. She said she was not yelling. He said she was, and if she continued, he would have to ask her to leave. She stepped back but did not leave. The deputy picked up his pass and left. That was the funny karma beat. Sharon had threatened to call police on me all week, and when an officer was actually present, he told her to stop yelling. If you enjoyed the chaos so far, Please like this video and subscribe for more wild HOA drama stories. There is plenty more to come, and it only gets crazier from here. I submitted my written response to Linda. It was 2 pages. I included the clerk confirmation photo, the tow company incident number, and a timeline showing Sharon had lied about the mailer and misrepresented what Eric said. I also included a statement from Marcus saying he had camera footage that proved no one had approached my car during the time frame Sharon claimed. Linda accepted it and said it would be forwarded to the board. She said the portal lockout would stay in place until the investigation closed. I asked how long that would take. She said 2 to 4 weeks. I said that was not acceptable. She said it was policy. I asked if I could escalate. She said the manager was out until Monday and I could request a meeting then. I thanked her and left. Sharon was waiting outside the office. She stepped in front of me and said the board had already reviewed her complaint and my response would not change anything. I said she was lying. She said I could not prove it. I pulled out my phone and played the voicemail from the tow dispatcher on speaker. His voice said clearly, "Sharon Whitfield gave incorrect information. The tow request is cancelled, and we are noting this in our records." Sharon's face went red. She tried to grab my phone. I stepped back and held it up. Marcus was walking past and saw the whole thing. He stopped and said, "I got that on video." Sharon turned and said he was interfering. Marcus said he was a witness and he was tired of her targeting people. He pulled out his phone and showed me a clip of Sharon trying to grab mine. I asked him to send it to me. He did, right there. That was clue number 4. That afternoon I went to the mail center and asked Eric if he would be willing to give a written statement. He hesitated, then said Sharon had come back earlier that week and tried to pressure him into changing his story. He said she told him he could be held liable for misinformation if he contradicted her minutes. He said he told her no and she left angry. He agreed to write a statement and sign it. I printed it on the spot and scanned it. That was clue number 5. Sunday, Marcus texted me and said he had reviewed his camera footage. He said the torn mailer had been on the ground near my bins for 3 days before I picked it up, and his footage showed Sharon walking through the garage that same morning. He said Sharon had paused near my car, looked around, and then walked away. He said he could not see what she was holding, but the timing matched. He offered to send me the clip. I said yes. He sent it within the hour. The footage was grainy but clear enough to show Sharon in the garage at 6 in the morning, 3 hours before she confronted me. That was clue number 6. Monday, I requested a meeting with the property manager, a man named Robert. Linda scheduled it for Tuesday morning. I brought my evidence binder, which I had assembled over the weekend. It had the clerk statement, the tow incident number, the Marcus video of Sharon trying to grab my phone, the doorbell camera clip from Marcus showing Sharon in the garage, the sticky note from Eric, and a printed copy of Sharon's violation notice with notes showing it had no case number or witness names. I also brought a small flashlight which I planned to use to point at camera lenses during any future confrontations for emphasis. It was a practical tool and it made me feel more prepared. Robert reviewed my evidence for 20 minutes. He asked clarifying questions about the mailer, the timeline, and Sharon's complaint. I walked him through every clue. He made notes. Then he said something that changed everything. He said the HOA had 2 versions of the rulebook. The board used an internal version with detailed enforcement procedures and resident protections. Residents only saw a condensed version with stricter language. Sharon had been citing the resident version to justify her actions, but the internal version required witness statements, case numbers, and manager approval before any violation notice could be issued. She had violated procedure at every step. Robert said he would forward this to the board and recommend immediate corrective action. He said my portal lockout would be lifted by end of day, and Sharon would be notified that her complaint was unfounded. I asked what would happen to Sharon. Robert said that was a board decision, but her role as landscape chair required adherence to enforcement procedures, and she had failed that standard. He said the board would meet Wednesday night and I could attend if I wanted. I said I would. Tuesday afternoon, my portal access was restored. I logged in and found a message from Robert saying the complaint had been closed and no violation would be recorded. I also found a saved draft in Sharon's account history. The portal had a transparency feature that logged all edits and submissions. Sharon had drafted 3 different versions of her complaint before submitting the final one. The first version said she suspected me of theft but had no proof. The second version said a witness saw me near the mailer. The third version, the one she submitted, said a clerk confirmed I had taken packages. The audit log showed she had deleted the first 2 drafts. That was clue number 7, and it was the smoking gun. I screenshotted the entire log, including the metadata showing when each draft was created and deleted. The timestamps proved she had escalated her accusation deliberately and without evidence. I called Marcus and told him about the audit log. He said he would attend the board meeting and bring his footage. I called Eric and asked if he would be willing to submit his statement to the board. He said yes. I printed everything and added it to my binder. I also printed a second copy for the board. Wednesday evening, I arrived at the clubhouse for the board meeting. The meeting was held in a small conference room with a folding table and 8 chairs. 5 board members were present, including the president, a retired accountant named Gerald. Sharon was already there, sitting near the door with her binder and her key ring. She glared at me when I walked in. Marcus arrived a few minutes later and sat next to me. Robert sat at the head of the table with a laptop. Gerald called the meeting to order and said the first item was the complaint filed by Sharon Whitfield regarding alleged package theft. He asked Sharon to present her case. Sharon stood and opened her binder. She said she had observed suspicious activity in the garage. She had confirmed with a mail center clerk that protocols were violated, and she had issued a violation notice in accordance with HOA policy. She said the resident in question, meaning me, had refused to cooperate and had harassed her in public. She held up her phone and said she had video evidence. Gerald asked to see it. She played a clip of me standing in the parking lot while she narrated off-camera. The clip showed nothing incriminating. Gerald thanked her and asked if there were any witnesses. Sharon said the mail clerk was a witness. Gerald asked if the clerk was present. Sharon said no. Gerald asked me to present my response. I stood and handed out copies of my evidence binder to each board member. I walked them through the timeline, starting with the torn mailer and ending with the audit log screenshot. I explained that Sharon had lied about the clerk confirmation, misrepresented the tow request, violated enforcement procedures, and drafted multiple versions of her complaint to escalate the accusation without proof. I played the voicemail from the tow dispatcher on speaker. I showed Eric's signed statement. I showed Marcus's video of Sharon trying to grab my phone. Then I showed the doorbell camera footage from Marcus that placed Sharon in the garage the morning before she confronted me. I pointed out that the metadata on her complaint drafts proved she had invented the witness claim after the fact. Gerald asked Sharon to respond. She said the audit log was irrelevant because drafts were not official. She said the clerk was mistaken. She said Marcus was biased because he was my neighbor. She said the doorbell footage proved nothing. Gerald asked if she had any documentation showing she had followed enforcement procedures. She opened her binder and flipped through blank-looking pages. She said her minutes were sufficient. Gerald asked to see the minutes. She handed him a single page with 3 sentences and no signatures. Gerald looked at Robert. Robert said the internal rulebook required witness statements, case numbers, and manager approval before a violation notice could be issued. He said Sharon had bypassed all 3. Gerald asked Sharon why she had bypassed procedure. She said she was authorized to enforce rules. Gerald said her role as landscape chair did not grant enforcement authority without manager approval. He said the board had received complaints from the HOA insurance carrier about harassment exposure, and they were concerned about liability. That was when everything shifted. Gerald said the board had reviewed the evidence and found Sharon's complaint to be unfounded and procedurally invalid. He said her actions had created liability risk for the association and violated resident rights. He said the board was voting immediately to remove her from the landscape committee and revoke her access credentials. Sharon stood up and said they could not do that. Gerald said they could, and they were. He asked for a motion. 3 board members raised their hands. Gerald said the motion passed. He asked Linda, who was taking notes, to confiscate Sharon's badge and keys. Linda stood and walked over to Sharon. Sharon tried to argue. Linda repeated the board decision calmly and held out her hand. Sharon handed over the badge and the key ring. The keys jingled one last time. Linda placed them in a manila envelope and sealed it. Sharon tried one last move. She reached across the table and tried to seize my evidence binder, saying it was falsified. Marcus pulled out his phone and took a photo of her lunging. The flash went off. Everyone froze. Gerald said the meeting was over and Sharon needed to leave. Sharon said she would sue. Gerald said that was her right, but she was no longer a committee member and she needed to vacate the room. Sharon grabbed her binder and walked out. The door slammed. Gerald turned to me and apologized on behalf of the board. He said the portal lockout was lifted, the complaint was expunged, and no fees or fines would be assessed. He said the board would be reviewing all of Sharon's prior complaints to ensure no other residents had been wrongly targeted. He also said the board would be distributing the internal rulebook to all residents within 30 days to prevent future confusion. I thanked him and left. Thursday morning, Robert called me and said the board had completed a key log audit. The audit showed Sharon had used her master key to access the storage closet, the mailroom, and the clubhouse supply room over the past 6 months. Security footage review showed her removing items including paper reams, cleaning supplies, and petty cash envelopes. The audit also showed she had accessed my garage space twice in the week before she confronted me. Robert said the board was filing a formal complaint with Spokane Police and pursuing restitution. He said Sharon had been banned from all common areas effective immediately. I asked what happened to her. Robert said the board had notified her landlord, who was also a unit owner, and the landlord was pursuing eviction for lease violations. He said Sharon's access cards had been deactivated and her parking pass revoked. He said the HOA insurance carrier had been notified and was conducting a liability review. He said the board was implementing new procedures to prevent similar abuse, including mandatory manager approval for all violation notices and quarterly audits of key access logs. Friday afternoon, I was walking to my car when I saw a tow truck pull up to the clubhouse. The driver got out and knocked on the management office door. Linda came out and they spoke for a minute. The driver walked back to his truck and drove away. I asked Linda what that was about. She said Sharon had called the tow company again that morning and tried to request my car be towed for unpaid violations. The dispatcher recognized her name from the prior incident and refused the request. He had sent a driver to deliver a written cease and desist notice to the HOA on behalf of the company. Linda said the company was threatening to terminate their contract if Sharon contacted them again. She said the board was relieved. I ran into Marcus at the mailbox cluster that evening. He said the neighborhood group chat had exploded after the board meeting. Several residents had come forward with stories about Sharon targeting them with fake violations and intimidation tactics. One resident said Sharon had tried to fine her for parking in a guest spot overnight. Another said Sharon had accused him of stealing landscaping tools and threatened to call police. Marcus said people were relieved she was gone. He said the board was planning a community meeting next month to rebuild trust. The following week, I received a formal apology letter from the board, signed by Gerald. It said the board had failed to oversee Sharon's enforcement actions and had allowed her to operate without accountability. It said the board took full responsibility for the harm caused and was committed to preventing future abuse. It included a check reimbursing me for the time I had taken off work to gather evidence and attend meetings. The amount was small, but the gesture mattered. Sharon moved out 3 weeks later. I saw the moving truck from my balcony. She did not look at anyone. Marcus texted me a photo of the empty parking space where her car used to be. He added a thumbs-up emoji. The HOA implemented the new procedures Robert had mentioned. All violation notices now required manager approval, witness statements, and case numbers. The board distributed the internal rulebook to every resident and posted it on the portal. They also created a new complaint review process with a third-party mediator for disputed cases. Gerald sent an email thanking residents for their patience and promising transparency moving forward. I kept my evidence binder in my desk drawer. I never needed it again, but it felt good to have it. Marcus and I became friends. We met for coffee once a week and talked about normal things. He said he was glad I had stood up to Sharon because no one else had been willing to. I said I was glad he had my back. The stolen items Sharon had taken were never fully recovered. The board estimated she had taken about $800 in petty cash and supplies over 6 months. They wrote it off as a loss and tightened access controls. Security footage showed she had been taking small amounts at a time, which made it hard to notice. The key log audit had been the breakthrough, and it only happened because the board was forced to investigate after the insurance carrier raised concerns about harassment exposure. That was the consequence Sharon could not escape. The board panicked when the insurer warned them about liability, and they moved fast to cut ties. Eric, the mail clerk, told me later that Sharon had been banned from the mail center after she tried to intimidate him into lying. He said the center manager had filed a harassment complaint with the postal inspector. He said Sharon never came back. I thanked him again for the statement. He said he was just doing his job. Linda, the receptionist, told me privately that Sharon had been a problem for years, but the board had ignored complaints because she was good at organizing events and keeping the landscaping budget low. She said the audit log discovery had shocked everyone because it proved Sharon had been planning her accusations methodically. Linda said the board had learned a hard lesson about oversight. I said I hoped they had. The photo metadata detail that contradicted Sharon's claimed time was the final nail. Marcus's doorbell footage showed Sharon in the garage at 6 in the morning. Sharon's complaint said she had observed suspicious activity at 8 in the morning. The 2-hour gap proved she had fabricated the observation time to make her story more credible. When Robert presented that discrepancy to the board, it destroyed any remaining trust Sharon had. That was the payback vector, and it was simple and impossible to explain away. Sharon's badge and props got confiscated by staff, as I had seen in the board meeting. The key ring with too many keys was sealed in a manila envelope and placed in a locked file cabinet. The cheap plastic badge was returned to the vendor who had sold it to her. The evidence binder she carried was mostly blank pages with a few printed HOA memos that had no relevance to any actual cases. Linda said Sharon had been using the binder as a prop to intimidate people. It worked until someone called her bluff. The HOA was warned by their insurer about harassment exposure and they panicked. The insurance carrier sent a formal notice saying the association's liability coverage could be at risk if they did not implement stronger oversight and anti-harassment policies. The board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to adopt the changes Robert had proposed. Gerald told me later that the insurance scare was the only thing that forced the board to act quickly. He said they had been dragging their feet until the carrier made it clear there would be financial consequences. I still live at Juniper Grove. The community feels different now. People are more willing to speak up when something feels wrong. The new procedures work. The board is more responsive. Marcus and I still meet for coffee. We talk about work, hobbies, and normal neighbor things. We do not talk about Sharon much anymore. She is gone, and the damage she caused has been repaired as much as it can be. I learned a lot from the experience. I learned that documentation is everything. I learned that staying calm under pressure gives you power. I learned that most bullies fold when you call their bluff with evidence. I learned that allies matter, and sometimes one person speaking up gives others the courage to do the same. I learned that institutions move slowly, but they move faster when money and liability are on the line. The stolen clipboard with forms in a clear sleeve was found in Sharon's car after she moved out. The landlord discovered it during the final walkthrough and returned it to the HOA office. It had belonged to the maintenance crew and had been missing for weeks. Linda said it was just one more item on the list of things Sharon had taken. The list grew longer every time someone checked their inventory. The final humiliation moment when Sharon tried to seize my binder and got photographed instantly by Marcus became a small legend in the community. People talked about it for weeks. The photo showed Sharon lunging across the table, her face twisted with anger, while I sat calmly with my hands on the binder. Marcus said he had never seen a flash freeze a moment so perfectly. He said he printed a copy and kept it on his fridge as a reminder that bullies lose when people stand together. The tow yard never became a real issue for me, but the threat had been real. Sharon had tried to weaponize vendor relationships to punish me, and it almost worked. If the tow dispatcher had not verified my claims, my car could have been impounded, and I would have lost a full day of work and paid hundreds in fees to recover it. The time pressure was designed to break me, and it would have worked if I had not kept every receipt and every screenshot. That was the lesson I carried forward. Always keep proof. Always stay one step ahead. The community is quieter now. The drama is over. The rules are clear. The board is accountable. Sharon is gone, and no one misses her. The neighborhood group chat is boring again, full of lost cat posts and garage sale notices. That is how it should be. Keep your paper trail close, and I will see you next time.